Good morning, everyone. We're going to begin with some brief remarks from Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and he'll be giving you all an update on Phase 4 negotiations.
Good morning. As you know, over the last several days, we've been having conversations on Capitol Hill, Secretary Mnuchin and myself, with Democrat and Republican leaders, both in the House and the Senate. Last night, we concluded a meeting with Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi a little bit before 10 o'clock. And at the president's direction, we have made no less than 4 different offers to Democrats on Capitol Hill on how we can make sure that the enhanced unemployment that is set to expire today, along with eviction protection that is set to expire as well, is protected. And those 4 different offers have been actually rejected. But more importantly than that, they've not even been countered with a proposal. So the Democrats are certainly willing today to allow some of the American citizens who are struggling the most under this pandemic to go unprotected. And the president has been very clear for us to be aggressive and forward-leaning to make sure that they get protected. And yet what we're seeing is politics as usual from Democrats up on Capitol Hill. It surprises me that when we talk about compassion and caring about those that truly are in need, that a temporary solution to make sure that unemployment, enhanced unemployment continues, has been rejected not once but multiple times. The Democrats believe that they have all the cards on their side, and they're willing to play those cards at the expense of those that are hurting. And we'll continue on with additional discussions today with Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi, perhaps an in-person meeting tomorrow on Capitol Hill as we stay engaged. But I'm disappointed in what we've experienced over the last 3 days. And I want to stress that the Democrats have made 0 offers over the last 3 days. 0. And so in a spirit of compromise, the president has sent us back not once, not twice, but 3 different times to try to find some common ground. And what we've found from our Democrat negotiators is that they are bumping the price higher than the very bill that they passed out of the House several weeks ago. And to give you a particular example of that is in their HEROES bill, they have $100 billion for schools. We matched that offer and actually put forth a proposal for $105 billion for schools for K through 12 and higher institutions. And yet, what did they say to that? Oh no, that was 2 months ago. We want to increase the amount of money that we send to schools to $400 billion. We're going in the wrong direction. They're going in the wrong direction because of partisan politics. It is very disappointing. And so we call on Capitol Hill to get serious about their negotiations. The president is serious about the negotiations. We're willing to engage. As you know, Leader McConnell yesterday put forth a 1-week extension at the current levels for enhanced unemployment. And what did we see? Senator Schumer objected to that. So there's no clearer message that the American people should receive other than the fact that the Democrats are willing to play politics at a critical time in our nation's very dire circumstances as we deal with this pandemic. So I wanted to give you that brief update so that you could have it straight from the negotiations as they've happened over the last 3 days. And as we work, I'm going to turn it over to the press secretary, and I think she's prepared to answer all the questions.
liability insurance? Is that a red line for you guys? McConnell said it was.
Thank you, guys.
I think she'll address that.
I'll take your questions in just a moment. The chief has to run to a meeting. But earlier this week, I just wanted to start off with an overview of what we've been doing on COVID. President Trump visited the great state of North Carolina to highlight the important work being done as part of Operation Warp Speed. And thanks to President Trump's leadership, the Trump administration has made substantial investments, including investing in multiple vaccine candidates, with several entering phase 3 clinical trials, including AstraZeneca, Moderna, and Pfizer, providing financial infrastructure for mass manufacturing of potential vaccines, guaranteeing doses of a vaccine will be available for distribution shortly after approval. The race for a coronavirus vaccine is truly moving at warp speed under President Trump. In addition, President Trump is leading on therapeutics. Over 140 clinical trials are now underway. Remdesivir, dexamethasone, convalescent plasma, and monoclonal antibody treatments. Yesterday, President Trump visited the American Red Cross headquarters to hold a roundtable on donating plasma. This initiative will empower Americans to help their fellow Americans in battling the virus. These critical investments in a coronavirus vaccine are due to the fact that we have a businessman in the White House. And according to the Wall Street Journal, quote, Democrats blame the U.S. case surge on inadequate testing and contact tracing, but the U.S. has averaged 2 to 3 times more tests per capita than most European and Asian countries. Indeed, we've done more than 59 million tests, with India at number 2 with just about 14 million tests, so quite a difference there. Arizona, California, Florida, and Texas all were doing more tests per capita when they lifted their lockdowns, more per capita than Germany, Spain, France, and South Korea have averaged. The U.S. is the undisputed world leader in testing, and on top of the more than 59 million tests that we've done, the FDA has authorized more than 193 tests under emergency use authorizations, including molecular and antibody tests. Under the leadership of President Trump, the U.S. is leading the world in safe and effective therapeutics and the rapid development of a potential vaccine. Together, as one American people, we will defeat the invisible enemy. And with that, I will take questions. Paula.
Kaylee, thank you. On Mark's comments about how it's Democrats who won't compromise, Democrats came up with a plan 2 months ago. The Republican plan was just presented on Monday, and in that time, the president has contradicted the Republican plan on the amount of stimulus checks, on student loans. Mitch McConnell threw you guys under the bus on funding for the FBI building. What do you say to the tens of millions of people who are going to lose their benefits when it appears that the real issue is that Republicans cannot agree among themselves, even though they've had months?
That's not it at all. In fact, Democrats offered a $3 trillion plan. We have a very specific focus right now, and it's not this comprehensive plan, whether it be the HEROES Act the Democrats proposed that was unserious, or the HEALS Act. That narrow focus is this, that Americans are about to lose their unemployment insurance, and this White House, this Chief of Staff, this President, this Secretary of the Treasury have offered several iterations to make sure that Americans who through no fault of their own lost their jobs during this pandemic do not also lose these checks. We've made several proposals, as Mark Meadows just said to you. And how many proposals have the Democrats made? 0. And if you want to know where the Democrats' true intentions lie, look no further than the Martha McSally bill that was presented that would have extended the $600 unemployment insurance. It was rejected by Chuck Schumer, and that was a plan that the president was willing to endorse.
The White House
What do you say to those that are going to lose $600 a week in unemployment payments that need that money? And also, why didn't you start negotiating earlier, and why only the offer of an extension of 1 week?
Well, what I would say to them is that this is unacceptable, that the Democrats have been fundamentally unserious. And you just heard the Chief of Staff say a great example of that is they had this massive $3 trillion bill that called for $100 billion in school funding. We then gave $105 billion, which then was deemed insufficient. So if Democrats were interested in extending unemployment insurance and helping the American people, they would have endorsed the Martha McSally bill and extended this by a week to give us time as we try to extend this in perpetuity, while we also focus on evictions as well.
What do you say to those Americans that are about to lose $600 a week?
That they need to be calling the offices of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and say, get to work and stop engaging in politics on the backs of hardworking Americans who deserve these checks, who lost their jobs through no fault of their own.
Are you willing to pass on the liability protection?
That's a question for Mitch McConnell. He said that that's going to be a part of any bill, but that's Mitch McConnell's, that's his priority. This president is very keenly focused on unemployment insurance, and the Martha McSally bill is a great example of what Democrats are focused on. Yes.
Kaylee, if the president is so worried about how long it'll take to count ballots in the election, then why isn't the president and this White House doing everything it can to secure more funding for staffing and other resources to make sure that we can have a safe and proper election?
Look, what this White House is focused on is making sure that our election is not riddled with voting fraud and that the timetable is not hung up here. There are several lawsuits that the campaign is engaged on, and I would point you to the campaign for specifics
That doesn't
on
answer
those.
my question, though. My question is, what is the White House doing to get more resources for funding and staff to make sure, as the president says, that it will be a secure and safe election?
Well, as you know, Peter, states run their elections, and it is up to states to
And
make
they're
sure that
asking
they
for
have
more
the
money.
capacity. But what this White House is focused on is ensuring that what Jeffrey Toobin has said over at the New Yorker, CNN contributor, notably, New York's primary vote count chaos signals trouble for November. And as he noted, you want to talk about the president, but Jeffrey Toobin himself, Democrats control the state government of New York. They are responsible for creating the fiasco that is unfolding now, and that is certain to get worse in November. States need to get their acts together when it comes to elections. And as we see in New York, where we're 5 weeks out from that election, and in fact, we still don't know the outcome of a congressional race, and that is certainly not what we want to see.
And I'm asking
in
you about the
November.
president. You
Yes,
asked why I was
Darlene.
asking about the president. I'm asking about the president because you work for the president. I
Yes.
guess the question is
Oh, Ann.
more specific.
Thank you, Kaylee. So the president's meeting this morning in a few minutes with the National Association of Police Organizations. In 2008 and 2012, they supported Barack Obama and Joe Biden. In 2016, they didn't support either candidate. And now in 2020, they're endorsing President Trump. To what does the White House attribute this change in support?
Well, it's clearly a change in the Democrat Party, Jen. When you look at the polling on defunding the police, ABC News, Ipsos poll, 64% oppose defunding the police. Huffington Post, 57% oppose. Rasmussen, 59% oppose. But make no mistakes, Democrats want to defund our law enforcement. It comes at a time where 64% of Americans say they are concerned that growing criticism of America's police will lead to a shortage of police officers and reduce public safety in the community where they live. The American people have seen very clearly where the Democrat Party of today stands. It's at an unacceptable place, and I think that this administration has shown great respect for our law enforcement, who every day are out there defending and protecting our streets in Democrat-run cities that have turned abundantly chaotic because of their lack of support and respect for law enforcement. Darlene.
Can you explain why the White House did not counter with a comprehensive plan of its own? You said the White House was focused on two things, the unemployment insurance and evictions. Why not have a more comprehensive proposal to counter what the Democrats had put on the table?
So I've walked through at this podium the more comprehensive plan that this White House was hoping to see, and our priorities like tax rebates, unemployment benefits, enhanced hiring and retention payroll credits, workplace tax credits, restaurant donations, and others. Those are all part of the HEALS Act. So there is a comprehensive plan that was put forward by Republicans on the Hill with several White House priorities in it. But right now, at this day, at this moment, our focus is making sure that Americans who have lost their jobs get their paychecks. It's why, as you heard the Chief of Staff say, we've made 4 proposals. Democrats have made precisely 0.
Can I ask about the nomination of General Tata? Is the White House still behind that?
The president still supports General Tata. Yes.
Kaylee, so is there anything that you agree with on the Democrats after all these negotiations? Are there any points of unity so far?
Well, look, they've presented 0 plans. So we've presented 4, they've presented 0. So do we agree with them? It seems that they don't agree with us. The White House supports unemployment insurance benefits. The White House supports ensuring Americans don't get evicted. But what do the Democrats support? What do they stand for? So far, they've offered 0, nothing, except rejecting Martha McSally's bill to ensure that those who are receiving those checks continue receiving them.
Is there an upper limit? Is
Yes.
there an upper limit, Kaylee, for the amount that you're willing to go to? Has the White House decided on some sort of a cap for how much you're willing to spend this round?
Not that I'm aware of. The president has said, he wants to make sure money gets to the American people. Yes.
The Trump administration wants $377 million in the coronavirus relief bill for the the long-delayed modernization of the West Wing. How is that a priority in terms of the coronavirus pandemic? You guys talked about priorities. You had the FBI bill, which doesn't seem to have much support from Capitol Hill as well.
So two things, and I'm glad you asked that because I do want to give you some details about those two items in particular. When it comes to the FBI building, this has been a long discussed issue. I would note that the 3 previous COVID bills that have been passed had plenty of other things in them that were not related to COVID. One of those examples is the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund. This is not a red line for us. It was a part of the initial bill, but it is certainly not a red line. The priority, as I've said several times so far, is unemployment insurance, making sure Americans do not get evicted. And then as it pertains to White House renovations, many of those pertain to safety protocols, filtration systems, enhanced communication ability, and needs that we saw that were highlighted during the pandemic. But make no mistake, a $377 million proposal will not stand in the way of ensuring that the American people get their checks. That is the priority, ensuring that Americans do not get evicted. That is our number 1, number 2 goals.
Thank you, Kaylee. I just wanted to confirm reports that Mark Meadows actually made an offer to extend unemployment insurance by 4 months.
I haven't spoken to him on that precise proposal, but as he's mentioned, there were 4 that were made.
Maybe a follow-up question then. I want to change gears and talk to you about Twitter. We reported yesterday that the Israeli government wrote to Twitter's CEO asking him to remove tweets from Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, calling for the genocide of the Israeli people. The company refused to do that because they said that the tweets were, quote, comments on current affairs. I'm wondering if the White House has a response, given that Twitter has recently begun restricting the president's own tweets for glorifying violence, quote, glorifying violence and spreading misinformation, and if you have spoken to the president about any further action perhaps he's taking on social media companies.
Yeah, it's a great question, Ebony. I did see that New York Post story, and I thought it was very eye-opening, and it tells you where these social media companies stand, where they're not willing to assess the Ayatollah Khomeini's tweets, but they are willing to assess President Trump's tweets. It's really appalling, and it just speaks to their overwhelming, blinding bias against conservatives and against this president. And we are taking action. The administration is submitting a petition to the FCC for proposed regulatory changes to hold social media companies accountable for their censorship. And this petition that was previously reported on earlier in the week asked the FCC to end the loophole that allows social media companies to escape civil lawsuits for their own speech, fact checks, and deplatforming. And the petition seeks to expose social media companies to liability as a speaker or a publisher if they act as editors of content on their platforms or remove lawful speech based on politics. And very good work by the New York Post in highlighting that issue. Yes.
Thanks. Can I follow up on Darlene's question on Tata for a minute? You said that the administration is still behind him, but are you guys considering putting him in an acting role?
I have no personnel announcements other to say than the president still supports him.
Can I just one follow-up?
Yes, thank you. It's been a month since there were reports of Russian bounties upon American military forces, and yet the White House has done nothing to push back on Putin. What is the delay?
So as I've answered probably a dozen times from this podium, that intelligence is unverified. There are dissenting opinions. The media is, I would point to the Department of Defense saying there's no corroborating evidence to validate recent allegations. NSC allegations and recent press articles have not been verified or substantiated by the intelligence community, and ODNI has a similar statement. But look, this president acts. He is not afraid to stand up to Russia. He's done so repeatedly when our adversaries have directly targeted U.S. or coalition partners. The president did not hesitate to act. Look at Syria in 2018 when dozens of Russian mercenaries were killed in a retaliatory defensive strike. He has continually stood up to Russia, will continue to do so, and this president will always protect our troops and our men and women overseas, and he will act on verified intelligence. Bill.
Thank you, ma'am. So Colorado, Hawaii, Oregon, Utah, and Washington all have automatic mail-in ballot systems. The White House has made its position clear on absentee ballots and also the concern over these universal systems. Does the White House think that those elections are fraudulent or more at risk of fraud?
always a mail-in ballot system, mass mail-out ballots are going to be more at risk of fraud. Look at LA County, where 112% of LA County is registered. That means you have 12% of excess ballots floating around that are, we know at least 12% that are not accurate ballots that were mailed out. This is a very basic concept, and it's one that the media has done a very good job reporting on, not just Jeffrey Toobin at the New Yorker. You also had the Washington Post article on this that the president held up yesterday that says the results that they've seen in a study showed that there's an unexpected stress test of mail balloting systems, many of which were designed to handle only a small portion of the vote and are not ready to scale up in response to a pandemic. That was Washington Post. There was another great ABC piece, mail-in voting delays in primary caused Pennsylvania to sound alarm about November. Expansion of mail-in voting will likely delay the state's presidential race. A great CBS report. Pennsylvania's mail-in votes still weren't all tallied up after 1 week. Officials fear election nightmare in November. So mass mail-in voting is certainly subject to fraud, and good work on the part of ABC, CBS, Washington Post, and the New Yorker for highlighting the fraud that is at play, the delays that are at play, because those are, after all, the facts.
Another quick one. The chief sounded quite frustrated a second ago. Is there any situation in which the White House would walk away from negotiations on Phase 4?
I won't get in the middle of the negotiations, and I'll leave that to the chief and to the Secretary of Treasury. But yeah, there's a lot of passion because we're passionate about making sure Americans are taken care of. I've heard the president personally talk about this. It is his goal to make sure that those who have lost their job get these payments, and those who, through no fault of their own, do not get evicted from their homes. So those, again, two big priorities for the president. Raquel?
Yes, thank you, Katie, so much. I have two questions. One, you were here saying that how well the administration is doing is responding to the pandemic, but the facts don't show that, and Americans are struggling and scared. What do you tell them, the American people?
So the one thing I would say is the president's made clear that we're at a place where we want all Americans to make sure that they socially distance and that they make sure they engage in mitigation tactics. And the president's been clear on that. But one of the things I think, as when you look at the United States response, you look at the fact that we were supposed to have a ventilator shortage. In fact, we had a ventilator surplus. We were told that there's a testing shortage. Well, it turns out we've done at this point almost 60 million tests. This president led on the development of remdesivir. We just saw this week promising signs from convalescent plasma. Our therapeutics are advanced, I would argue the best in the world. And that's why when you look at, in particular, at the case fatality rate, which the president often talks about, you see that tells a big story. When the U.S. case fatality rate is at 3.4%, the world's is at 4% averaged, and the EU at 9.7%. That is a testament to our therapeutics. But we encourage every American to engage in mitigation efforts. And it's patriotic, as the president said, to wear a mask, especially when you can't socially distance. Hunter.
Can I ask another question on the travel ban?
Hunter. A travel ban.
Travel ban. Yes, there is a movement growing called Love is Not Tourism. They are families and couples separate for a month because of the travel ban. Couples who couldn't be together on their childbirth, or mothers and sons, or are separated during illness. They are asking if the administration could consider a waiver in their cases.
I haven't spoken to the president about those specific cases, but this president will always put America first. This president put in place the travel bans to protect American lives, and they've done that. Dr. Fauci acknowledging that the travel bans have saved American lives, and that is our goal at this moment. Hunter.
Thank you, Kayleigh. Two quick questions for you. Herman Cain passed away yesterday, and obviously he had tested positive for COVID 9 days after attending the president's rally in Tulsa. Officials there have connected the rally to a spike in cases. Is there any concern that Herman Cain may have contracted coronavirus at the president's rally? And is the task force doing any follow-up to track other potential cases from that event?
Look, Herman Cain is the absolute embodiment of the American dream. We are grieved and we are very saddened by his passing. He was raised in Atlanta, Georgia, on a small farm. He left with just the clothes on his back. His mother was a housekeeper, and he rose to be an extremely successful businessman and someone who was who contended for the nomination of our party. And I would refer you to a post on Herman Cain's website, and he says, "I realize," or his website rather, "I realize people will speculate about the Tulsa rally, but Herman did a lot of traveling the past week. I don't think there's any way to trace this to one specific contact that caused the infection. We'll never know." So that, and I will not politicize Herman Cain's passing, and I would just note the great contributions he's made to our society. We'll always remember him, and his legacy will stand.
And then just a follow-up on another point. Obviously, the president's tweet yesterday seemed to float the idea of delaying the election. He later said, he supports no date change whatsoever. Given a little bit of the ambiguity and confusion there, can you just state unequivocally whether or not the White House wants to see the date changed, and state 100% that that is not something that you support?
The president answered this 3 times yesterday. He said, "I want the date more than anyone. I don't want to delay. I want to have the election." And in a local interview he said, "No one wants the date of the election more than me," because he believes November 3rd will be a moment where the American people acknowledge the great successes of this administration. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Does the president support the Chinese-backed Hong Kong government in delaying their elections?
Yeah, so I do have an answer for you on the Hong Kong elections. We condemn the Hong Kong government's decision to postpone for 1 year its legislative council elections and to disqualify opposition candidates. This action undermines the democratic processes and freedoms that have underpinned Hong Kong's prosperity, and this is only the most recent in a growing list of broken promises by Beijing, which promised autonomy and freedoms to the Hong Kong people until 2047 in the Sino-British Joint Declaration. I think it's appropriate as we see this play out on the Hill, this testimony by our doctors, to just acknowledge the real successes and work of this administration. I acknowledge the ventilators, and I talked about testing and just great American industry coming together, the American people coming together and working to get us through this tragic pandemic. And we grieve when even one life is lost. But I do want to point out just the early actions of this administration. When there were 0 reported cases in the United States on January 6th, the CDC issued Wuhan travel notice before any U.S. confirmed cases. But what were Pelosi and Chuck Schumer doing? They were calling on the GOP to support Bolton testifying. 0 reported cases in the United States on January 17th. The CDC implements public health entry screenings at 3 major U.S. airports receiving the greatest volume of Wuhan passengers. What were Democrats doing? House Democrats were preparing to file their first brief in the sham impeachment inquiry. When there was 1 reported case in the United States on January 21st, CDC activated Emergency Operations Center. What were Democrats doing? Chuck Schumer was calling for witnesses in the impeachment trial, and Pelosi released a statement criticizing Mitch McConnell for his trial rules. And finally, when there were 7 reported cases in the United States on January 31st, President Trump issued travel restrictions on China and the first mandatory quarantine in more than 50 years. And those travel restrictions saved American lives. But what were Democrats doing? Pelosi was introducing the No Ban Act, which would have imposed undue limitations on the president's authority to restrict entry of aliens into the United States. And what are Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi doing now? Stopping Americans from getting their unemployment insurance. And it's despicable, and it's time for them to come to the negotiating table. Thank you very much.
Pleased to welcome the leaders and friends of mine, in many cases, of the National Association of Police Organizations. We have some of the great police representatives in the country here, maybe the best, I would say. Pat, what do you think? The best? Representing more than 240,000 of our nation's courageous police officers. I want to thank the association president, a friend of mine, Mick McHale, who who's been tremendous, who I call on occasionally to say what the hell's happening in a certain location. And he gives me the advice, and I was very honored to receive the endorsement. That was a great endorsement. We very much appreciate it, Mick. The entire leadership team is here today representing large portions. What would you say the percentage of police in the country are represented in this room? Big portion?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, very big portion. I appreciate it. Also, I want to thank our Vice President, Mike Pence. He's been very involved in a lot of issues, but this issue is one of his very important ones, I think we can say, Mike, right?
Thank you, Mr. President.
We're here to discuss the unwavering support of our nation's courageous police officers and our determination to defend the safety of all Americans. I just spoke on Portland. I just spoke with Chad Wolf, who's doing a fantastic job at Homeland. And the courthouse is totally secure. It has been ever since we've been there. We had to move in about a week and a half ago because they were going to take down the federal courthouse. This is not even believable. You know, you tell these stories, it's not even believable. Homeland Security moved a team of very talented people, strong, tough people, and the courthouse has been in very good shape. They're not an offensive team, they're a defensive team. They're not allowed to be offensive, unfortunately. And you had radical anarchists, you had horrible people, you had agitators. There weren't protesters, there might have been protesters, but the ones that were the problem were absolute anarchists and in many cases professionals. So a lot of people have been arrested, and we've told the mayor, we told the governor, you better get in there and do your thing. And they finally, they should have done this 60 days ago. A lot of people have been hurt. A lot of law enforcement people have been hurt, and they should have done this 60 days ago. So now they've freed up the park, cleaned out the park, and they're moving their way. And if they have any other problems, we're going to take a very strong offensive force. Nothing started because the federal government was there. In fact, if we weren't there, you would not have a courthouse right now. You know, the media, some of the media, not all of it, but some of it, they are saying that because the federal government walked in, they became worse. Now, because the federal government walked in, we saved the U.S. courthouse, the federal courthouse, which is was a magnificent. It will be shortly, but you know, there's graffiti all over it and everything else. That's why we moved in, because the local police were not protecting federal property. So Homeland Security has done a fantastic job. I appreciate it. Chad Wolf and the entire team have been fantastic. And it seems to be cleaning up. And if it doesn't clean up, we're going to do something very, very powerful, because we have no choice. Not that I want to do it. I don't want to do it, but we have no choice. In recent weeks, law enforcement has become the target of a dangerous assault by the radical left. The left-wing extremists have spread mayhem throughout the streets of different cities, in particular Portland. If you look, Portland is one. Seattle certainly would be another. And we were getting ready to go into Seattle. We would have solved that problem very quickly. When they heard that we were going in, they went in. And by that time, the anarchists were exhausted, and they just raised their hand. They were exhausted and tired, and they had a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol, and they just gave up. They just raised their hands. They were sleeping there long enough. They took over actually a piece of Seattle, if you can believe that, Seattle being a major city, and they took over a piece. So we were ready to go into Seattle. Everyone knows that. We were going to go in with force, and we didn't have to, because the day before we were going in, and we let them know, the day before we were going in, this is what happens. They went in, and the anarchists and agitators gave up, and they gave it back. Joe Biden's pledge to cut police funding. You do know about that, Mick, I assume, right? You've heard that little rumor? This guy has been dragged so far left. Biden has been taken further left than Bernie ever was. Bernie was never this. I mean, totally open borders and the sanctuary city stuff that he's approving things that Bernie never thought of. It was supposed to be they were going to take him right. They took Biden way left of where Bernie was because they have the manifesto. I don't know. Have you seen the manifesto they've got? Now I understand they can't get any police in Milwaukee because you're not allowed to use pepper spray or tear gas because if you have crowds. But I don't think there's any other way other than the obvious way, which would be horrible. And that shooting itself, which would be horrible. But I don't know how you can control a crowd if that crowd's anything like what you have at Portland. There's no way you could possibly do it without tear gas and pepper spray. Pat, would you say that's a correct statement?
I agree. You have to control the streets. You have to do it fairly, but you have to do it.
It's pretty amazing, right? So you have no police that want to go to Portland because they know they can't do their job. You have to give them the equipment to do the job. It's incredible. They're not going to go till Milwaukee. So what's going to happen in Milwaukee, Mick? What do you think?
Well, I think that they're going to have the mad exodus that we're seeing in other parts of the country. And again, sir, it's the exposure of these men and women who continue to suit up and provide the safety that they took an oath to. And we want to, as an association, but we speak for all law enforcement, and thanking you personally for your executive order, which allowed us to surplus equipment. That equipment is saving our lives, literally, sir, and we thank you. We thank you for all of us.
Thank you. No, that was very controversial. The previous administration didn't want to do that. We had hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment, really good military equipment, good stuff, and a lot of it was protective. It was defensive equipment, where like vehicles that are very strong in terms of defense capability, where you wouldn't get hurt with the windows are, shatterproof, etc., and bulletproof. And we gave that out to our police departments. It was sitting there gaining dust. That was the only thing it was gaining, was dust. And we gave that out to all of our police departments all over the country. And you have no idea, every time I go someplace, the police thank me for that. This is stuff that was just getting less and less valuable. Much of it was brand new, but getting less and less valuable, sitting in warehouses. Probably the government was paying a lot of rent to the warehouses. And it's been a great thing. So as a result of the outrageous attacks on law enforcement, violent crime has surged in certain Democrat-run cities, many of them. I mean, you look at New York, it's up 348%. Who ever heard of a number like that? Because you have a radical left mayor who doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know what he's doing. I don't understand even how the police can allow it to happen. That's the only thing. We talk about that. But you look at Chicago. In Chicago, more than 2,200 people have been shot. Okay, think of that, shot. Now, that's far worse than Afghanistan. We're leaving Afghanistan fairly shortly, but we see things that in Chicago and other places that you don't see in Afghanistan. It's unbelievable. 40% increase from 2019. And the hard thing is that crime is down nationwide. So I'm taking all of these Democrat-run cities, and we're putting them in with the well-run cities and largely Republican well-run cities and states. And with all of this shooting that you see in Chicago and New York, and Minneapolis had a bad period, but we sent in the National Guard. The National Guard did a fantastic job, and they stopped it. That place would have burned down. Minneapolis would have burned down if I didn't force the National Guard into that. And you saw them form, right? It's a beautiful thing. All of a sudden, you see a line of people. They walk through it like a knife through butter. And that was the end of the problem in Minneapolis. So, we have to do that. But in New York City, nearly 300 people have been shot in the last month alone. Murders are up 32% in Philadelphia and 80% in Minneapolis compared to last year. Minneapolis, great place too. And Philadelphia, you think of it. I went to school in Philadelphia. You look at these numbers. In cities across the nation, we've also seen police officers assaulted with bricks, rocks, bats, Molotov cocktails, frozen bottles of water. Somebody said last night, one of these protesters, I saw it, he said, "It's only water. How can water hurt you?" Yeah, they don't say it's frozen in a bottle the size of a football, and they throw it at the police. It's unbelievable. It's water. And then they have cans of soup, and they throw the cans of soup. That's better than a brick because you can't throw a brick, it's too heavy. But a can of soup, you can really put some power into that, right?
Yes, sir.
And then when they get caught, they say, "No, this is soup for my family." They're so innocent. "This is soup for my family." It's incredible. And you have people coming over with bags of soup, big bags of soup, and they lay it on the ground, and the anarchists take it and they start throwing it at our cops, at our police. And if it hits you, that's worse than a brick because it's got force. It's the perfect size. It's like made perfect. And when they get caught, they say, "No, this is just soup for my family." And then the media says, "This is just soup. These people are very, very innocent. They're innocent people. These are just protesters. Isn't it wonderful to allow protesting?" No. And by the way, the media knows it better than we do. They know what's going on. I don't know what's wrong with them. They're doing our country a tremendous disservice, I'll say that. But in cities all across our nation, we've seen our police officers so badly assaulted. In Portland and the other cities, my administration is vigorously defending federal property from anarchists and criminals. We've also launched Operation Legend, surging federal law enforcement to communities plagued by violent crime. And we're willing to help Chicago. We're willing to help New York. We're willing to help Philadelphia, any city you want. But by law, unless we go a special route, which we have the right to do, but it's very rarely done, we have to be asked by the local government, by the mayors and by the governors. And they don't want to do it, I think for two reasons. Number one, they're embarrassed to do it. And number two, I actually think they're afraid of these people, if you want to know the truth. I actually think these are radical left maniacs. And I actually think, Pat, I think they're afraid of these people. I think they're afraid of those people that I see in Portland, and to a lesser extent that I've seen in Seattle. I mean, the Portland is a tougher group. You know, they've been doing that for years to Portland. They've been doing it for years and years to Portland, and the police stepped down. And I don't believe it's the police's fault. They're not allowed to do it. They're good police, but they can do it. Let's see how they do tonight. Last night, it was a big step, but let's see how they do. So it's an honor to have the associations here. We have been with them. I've had endorsements from so many police, and I don't even say thank you anymore. I say, what's your choice? Your choice is me or somebody that has no clue what they're doing. And I say that kiddingly, but I sort of mean it, right? I sort of mean it. So our relationship with law enforcement has been outstanding, and with firefighters. I mean, you have firefighters that go to put out a fire, and people are shooting at them. They're literally shooting at them as they're putting out the fire. Guys are going up on ladders, and people shoot at them. But we have great support from firefighters. Usually just the top one or two people don't support us, you know, because they're used to something else. But everybody in there, we have tremendous support from the police, the firefighters, and almost every group of people that are associated with the things that we're doing and doing really well. But I want to thank you all very much from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate those endorsements. We really do. It's really great. And you will never be let down with me. I have tremendous respect for what you do. It's dangerous. It pays not as well as they could do elsewhere. Many of the people, but they're discouraged. Many of the people, they do it, they love it, right? They love it. They would nothing they'd rather do. This is what they want to do. But it's a very dangerous profession. And we are going to toughen it up a lot, because the mayors and the governors aren't allowing you to do your job. And you got to be allowed to do your job. When you see the things that we've seen in St. Louis, and by the way, you look at the last administration with Ferguson and all of the problems they've had. I mean, they had some problems that are doozies. You know, people said, oh, the last administration, they had this. That's what started a lot of this. If you look at some of the things that they had, I could name 10 of them right now. But we have to strengthen up, because you're being told to do things that you know can't happen. In Seattle, they're reducing the force by massive numbers. In Portland, they're reducing their force. Can you imagine that? In Portland, they're reducing their force by massive numbers. But then the governor, like in Oregon, the governor said things that are just unbelievable. She doesn't want it to get better. The mayor of Seattle, the things that she said, we're going to have a summer of love. There's something going on that is crazy. Remember this, though, most of our cities are doing really, really well. And despite the pandemic, and we're doing a good job on that, we have vaccines that are really getting close. We have therapeutics that are really getting close. But despite all of that, these cities are doing very well, and law enforcement's at an all-time good. So most of it's good. We only talk about the bad, but most of it's good. Pat, would you like to say something, and representing our New York's finest, and we'll go around the room a little bit.
We should do. You know, in our city, we're going through a difficult time. We have a progressive mayor that's anti-police, a city council that's anti-police, and the state house is anti-police. So they're changing the law where it's becoming impossible to do our job. And remember what our job is, to keep folks safe. You do that by helping the good people, going after the bad people. They're stopping us from doing that. So we come
So if
down
a
here.
mayor tells you, you can't do that, you cannot, your job is to keep people safe, right?
That's it.
So is that a higher calling than listening to a mayor?
Well, you know what? They're the boss in our town, so we have to go by the rules they set. The problem is the rules they are setting, the laws they are passing, are making it impossible, because what happens then, we're criminally charged. So we come here today, Mr. President, to ask for help, to have a discussion
Do they
on what
actually
we
charge
need.
you criminally?
Yeah, they can charge us criminally, yes, sir. It's disgraceful. It's like they reversed the world. It's the upside down world right now. And I have 36 years in the job. I've never seen it this bad, sir.
Never been anything like it. Hey, look, I lived in New York, and we never had a problem in New York. New York was, once Rudy did a great job as mayor, in all fairness, because before that, but I think this is worse than the Dinkins era now. How do you compare this to the Dinkins era?
It's worse. You know, we had disturbances back during Mayor Dinkins' time, but we had it in one neighborhood, possibly two. We had disturbances recently in 3 boroughs, sir. You know, we have neighborhoods where your father started that it's going back to be crime-ridden. Into Manhattan, where you did so much building, it's starting to go back to crime-ridden, where they looted in Midtown. So obviously there's a
And
problem.
with Dinkins, if you go back to that period, everybody respected the police, and the police were allowed to do their job in all fairness. It was never like, we're going to cut our police force. It was always, we're going to get more police, in all fairness. And then Rudy came in and did a great job. So, you know, it's one of those things. I think you have to do what you have to do. I mean, you have to keep people safe. You have to keep people safe. Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, it just, you know, the level of attacks that are going at us, going after our qualified immunity, going after our due process rights, it's a complete assault on the people who are paid to protect the citizen. And if we can't do our job, if in Massachusetts, they want to file bills that we will not be able to put our hands on somebody unless we're arresting them. So if we're dealing with disorderly people, intoxicated people, people with mental health issues, trying to get them into an ambulance, get them to a hospital, we could be sued.
And you could be sued individually or as a force?
Individually.
So are they taking immunity away from you?
They're trying very hard.
Yeah, that's the next move. You know, they want to take immunity away from police so that if you do what you have to do and you do it right, you can get sued. I mean, the whole thing is just crazy. So you're having a hard time in Massachusetts?
Yes, Mr. President. We're working very hard. The unions are sticking together, working very hard, and hopefully we can curb some of this.
Is the governor trying to help?
It hasn't gotten to his desk yet, Mr. President, but we're hoping that we've made some very solid arguments on all these issues where he can slow the process down. That's the problem.
You guys have to stick together. You got to do what you're doing. I mean, you can't let it happen. You know exactly. For instance, when you have a problem in Massachusetts, are you allowed to use pepper spray?
Yes, Mr. President.
So you are. Do you think they're going to end that? Are they thinking about
that?
it?
That is one thing they have not gone after, Mr. President.
Because
They
it's
are going
impossible.
They are going after our canines. They are going after the tear gas. And our canine officers.
How are the canines? Very effective, I would imagine.
Yes, Mr. President. In multiple areas.
Yeah, right. And they're going to stop with the canines.
They are trying to limit their use, Mr. President.
And how about you, my friend?
We represent almost 33,000 law enforcement officers in the state of New Jersey. And, you know, I was talking this morning with these guys and I said that the defund the police is already, the experiment has already proven how poorly it is throughout the country. In New Jersey, they're talking about the new use of force policy with proportional force. And my response is, if you want to see a fair fight, go to a wrestling match where 185, you know, fights 185. We want to end these resisting cases as quickly as possible. There's nothing pretty about somebody resisting arrest. And if you're going to use proportional force, it's going to that's
So what does that mean? That means you can't put 2 on 1. You can't put 3 on 1. What does that all mean? You mean you have to give the criminal a chance? Is that what
we have to fight fair? I think to place them under arrest. We have
that's what I've never even heard of. Have you heard of that one, John? That's one.
No, sir. But nationwide, you know, it's proportional. It's use of force continuum. You can always extend. You can always go up in one level. And in New Jersey, the discussion now is the proportional use of force, which to me is going to make us look worse on the street.
You know what people don't understand is that the people, the voters, are with you guys 100%. I'll bet you if you looked, it would be really, I don't want to say a number because then they'll say, oh, he was wrong on the number. The number is, 2 points lower. It would be tremendously, it's a tremendous number. The people of our country love you guys. The people of our country want protection. They want safety. And what they're doing is they're just stripping, this radical left movement is stripping you of everything. And we're not going to let that happen. How about you?
Well, I work for the National Association, so I work for all these gentlemen and all their issues.
So you see it all, right?
Yes. And I just want to say thank you for giving us a seat at the table.
Okay, here's a question for you. So you work for all. What do you think is the worst? Where are they treated the worst? The police. Where are they treated the worst? And where is the biggest onus of problem? In other words, who here at this table, and this is just a small group of what we have, what area is treated the worst? Is it New York? Is it Massachusetts? You just said something. Although what I heard from New Jersey, I'm shocked because I know those great troopers on the highway. They pulled me over on occasion for speeding. Well, for speeding, I haven't got one of them recently, but I'd get pulled over and I'd look at those guys. I'd say, that guy, I'm not going to mess with that guy. But who do you think what area is treated the worst, meaning they've taken their power away?
Well, I don't think there's just one area. We hear from our membership across the country about various attempts to handcuff cops and their ability to do their job. I just think it depends on the area and what policies people are trying to push. I think cops across the country are having a very difficult time doing their job with very little public support. Obviously, the most of Americans.
Well, you have really public support, but it's sort of that
Right.
silent majority
Yes.
that we talk. But it's not a silent majority; it's a massive majority. It's not anything about the word majority is not a good enough word. You have tremendous public support, and these people feel they have to do this, the politicians, in order to stay relevant in this far left movement. John, what would you say about that? Who would you say is treated the worst in terms of areas?
I'd say him.
New York?
Yes. Yeah, listen to the Pat
One
yesterday.
of the worst, Pat. It can't be much worse than that.
It's getting worse by the day. Each morning you wake up, first you get a text on the number of shootings and deaths you had the night before. Sir, you remember when you were building in Manhattan and crime was out of control. We're back to 1993 numbers. Who thought we'd be back there? In South Jamaica, the numbers have gone crazy. When we turn the city around now, it's starting to slide back. I'm worried about the slide, sir, but the slide's going to continue.
And you could solve that rather quickly if they gave you your power back, right?
We've proved that we've done it. We want to do it
Yeah,
again.
no, it's easy. It's very, I mean, for you guys, that's what you want to do.
That's our job.
This is hard. What you're doing now is hard.
This is hard, and when folks in our city hall forget that, we're police officers, we have a shield on our chest, but we're also citizens. We're also in the church, synagogue, or mosque. We're also at the same street corner, dropping our children off, going to the same schools. We're in the same shopping malls, the same grocery stores. So we're part of the community, and they're trying to
Pat,
cut us
I
out.
remember 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when the police didn't respect the mayor. They haven't changed, in all fairness. But they would literally turn their back on the mayor. And he was really working hard to get them on his side. And now it's almost as though it's just the opposite. And why is that?
You know what? It takes more than words. You can read from a script as your actions. You can say you support police, but then pass laws that hurt us, so we know it's not true. If you remember when we turned our back on the mayor at the time, we had just had 2 police officers assassinated. What folks don't understand is we went to City Hall and begged that they stop the rhetoric. We said someone's going to get hurt. You know what happened? It was worse. They got killed. Ramos and Lou were assassinated in our favorite borough, Brooklyn. So it was a serious time, but it's gotten more serious since then, sir.
And do you see it turning around? Do you see it going back where the politicians are going to get smart? Because the numbers will get bad. And
yeah. So the communities have to realize that it's not just rhetoric, it's really their blood on the streets that's happening. And as I said, the numbers are going back to 1990s and shooting. So I think that's when
but the communities like the police. The communities want protection.
They love the police. In our most difficult neighborhoods, the community, the person sitting on the stoop, the person owning the bodega, is the one that's giving us the information we need to do our job. It's City Hall that's stopping us, sir.
Incredible. John, go ahead, please.
So, sir, I'm president of the Florida Police Benevolent Association, and Mick and I, Mick's the senior vice president of Florida, and recently, he and I have met with the incoming Senate President, Will Simpson, and the incoming House Speaker, Chris Sprowls, and they have assured us that they have our back. So, and I know the governor, DeSantis, has our back.
He's got you back.
He does. He does. However, there are some cities in Florida that want to defund. They want to create the civilian review board. So we got to stay on top of it.
Yeah.
Pat's got a problem, and whatever he needs from us, we got his back.
I think the cops in New York have to get tough again.
We want to, we have
They got to
skill
get
and
tough.
tools.
They got a big voice. You know, you got a lot of people, that's a great force, and they have to get tough again.
Absolutely correct.
They're going to have to take it and they're going to have to, you just said they have to protect, you're sworn to protect the people. You know, there's a point at which you have to, that's also an order coming down, protect the people. And I think Florida's going to be in great shape with you, Governor, and everything else. But you got to always watch it, John.
No, we do. We really do. And listen, we're out there working it. And like I said, we represent over 30,000. And we got a lot of retirees from New York and New Jersey.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Do they come into the force?
Can
you imagine? We train them in New York, they leave after 20 years and they go to Florida.
They go to court.
And they become police. They have a good life, right? You want to say something, Mick?
Yes, sir. I think what's important and what radiates to our membership, sir, is your support that we're entitled to due process. And I don't think enough of the public realizes that. But your message, getting behind our profession and simply saying we have due process as part of our state constitutions, and obviously we have a national due process that we're entitled to. That's all we ask for. Again, they're going each and every day under attack, but they raised their hand, they took an oath, and they're not going to give up. And it's your message, but it's your administration. The Attorney General has been to many of our cities, many of our functions, and he delivers the same message, and it's always from you, sir. We got your back. That's the most important aspect we could ever seek in our profession, to know somebody has our back.
Well,
in the
what do you
military,
do-
they say covering your six.
Right.
Sir, you're covering our six, and we've
I am covering you, but what do you do when you have a radical left, crazy mayor, and they're giving you orders that you know will lead to tremendous death and crime? Are you allowed to do your job, or are you going to have to listen to this crazy man that got appointed? Is there something you can do? Because I'll tell you, if you don't do your job, you're going to have certain cities in this country that are going to end up like Portland. And the mayor goes into the crowd the other night, and I watched very carefully, and I saw exactly what happened. He was excoriated. They went after him. It was incredible, right? And shouting at him, resign, get out of here, we don't want you, horrible. And yet I watched on NBC News, Lester Holt, on your news, Peter. If you watch that newscast, it was though it was a big, beautiful thing that he went in with the people. They didn't show the shouting and the get out of here, and they were rough. They would have ripped him apart. Peter, he had 5 bodyguards. 5 bodyguards. If he didn't have those bodyguards, you'd be talking about a funeral right now, because they were looking to do a bad thing on him. And he got out with his life. And yet I watched NBC, I was watching for some reason, NBC Nightly News, not even MSDNC. I'm watching NBC Nightly News, and if you watch that, it looked like he was a man of the people, the mayor. They would have ripped him apart. It just shows you, you need some help from the media. You need a little fair help from the media. What would you say, John?
I agree, Mr. President. I'm from New York City also with Patty, and I cover south of 59th Street, Manhattan South. The old show Beretta, remember? Their theme song was "Don't do the crime if you can't do the time." They're not doing time anymore. And the police want to do their job, and they're out there doing their job. It's not even a revolving door anymore. It's an open door where it comes right back out. The riots, the same people looting, were arrested 3 nights in a row. And they were back out the next day with their teams. The police want to do their jobs. They want to protect the communities. They love their communities.
And yet they go after General Flynn, who did nothing wrong.
No relation.
They go after General Flynn, I know. I was just saying, you look like his brother, maybe a little bit. Slightly different, John. But they'll go after General Flynn and these people.
Yeah.
that did nothing wrong.
They desecrated St. Patrick's Cathedral. Whether it's a cathedral, a mosque, a synagogue, there's a gentleman who's painting a blue line in Staten Island down the street, and he's getting letters of threat from the city to cease and desist the painting of a line. The buildings all over Manhattan are scribbled with anti-police messages and other things, and nothing happens. But you paint one blue line down the street, and they want to summons you and possibly arrest you.
It's true. They can do whatever they want. You do one blue line, and they make it like it's a mortal sin. Right? That's terrible. Do you ever think you'd see that?
No, sir.
And this has been happening now for a long time.
I would never thought there'd be torturing police vehicles in Manhattan, lighting them on fire.
And you could stop it instantaneously if you had the orders, right?
Yes, sir.
Instantaneously. I saw that. Jumping on top, hitting them with sledgehammers.
And the cops want to stop it.
And they want to stop it. Yeah. They'd stop it very easily. Please, go ahead.
Well, greetings from the great state of Texas. I'm the president of the
Well, you're in pretty good shape in Texas.
Some places I'm
a couple of places are a little shaky, right?
I actually serve in the state capitol in Austin. Not such a good place there. The rhetoric that's being pushed by certain segments of the population, they don't understand. Everyone that goes to work and takes a job as a police officer, or the vast majority, are there to make a difference and to protect their communities and to serve. You're going to get to a point in America, if this continues, where you're not going to be able to find people that are willing to take this job. We don't make the laws, we enforce.
Who's going to want to take a job where you don't have the backing of the people running the city, the elected people running the city? It's becoming a problem.
Yes, sir, it is. It's becoming a major problem all across the nation. We don't write laws. We just enforce the laws that the politicians write.
In New York, they fired some of the best policemen in the world, your crime fighters, and they let them go. How many was that? What group?
You know, we're losing huge numbers, and we have a problem on both ends, sir. We're losing members that are deciding to retire, upwards of 1,000. They're canceling classes of our young women and men that want to come on the job and serve, so they're not even bothering hiring them. And then, of course, that's going to drop too, because who would want to go into this profession at this time on this day? It's a problem, sir.
So I think you're talking about the anti-crime unit? The anti-crime unit in New York?
Yeah.
That unit. That's what I did before I became on the board.
Were you on the unit?
Yes, sir. And patrols out there every day, but they answer the radio. They're in uniform, and they respond from call to call, and the calls are getting so much more increased. Those guys in plain clothes, they went out and they looked for the bad guys. Then they took the guns off the street. And they really, did they have more shootings? Of course, because they're the ones going head to head with the guys with the guns. As soon as they canceled that unit, that weekend, that's when the shootings rose incredibly.
Yeah. And the bad ones knew it too, because they know the guys and they say, hey, we're not going to mess around with these guys. And now all of a sudden they heard they were fired. Oh boy, we have a free reign. That's what happened, right?
They went back
So
to
simple to understand. It's so simple. If the media the media is part of the problem, because they don't report the news the way it is. They don't report it. They make it look like these are wonderful people. I watched New York. I watched them burning storefronts and going crazy. I watched in Minneapolis. You have this guy from CNN with a camera. The city was burning behind him. And he's talking about what a lovely group of protesters. It's really disgraceful. The media is a big, I call it the opposition party. The media is a big part of the problem. There's really the fake news. It's a big part. They don't report it because it's common sense. It's so simple to understand. Hopefully Texas will be in great shape, okay? How about you down there?
Mr. President, thank you very much. I'm Bill Johnson. I'm the executive director for NAPO, and I kind of have a similar perspective to Andrea did in terms of nationally, all the problems that we've got, big cities, small towns.
Okay, so I'll ask you the same question. So where are you having the worst time?
I think, obviously, the violence that's going on in cities like New York City and Portland, Oregon is horrible.
What about Wisconsin, where they take the pepper spray and the tear gas away? What about that?
Those are difficult also. And there's also another problem where you have cities like Minneapolis, for example, where the violence has been quelled, but now you've got the city council voting to disband the entire police department. That's a whole nother kind of stress. It's bad for the officers,
they want
their
to
families.
disband the whole police department. Dismantle. So,
Yes, Mr.
yeah,
President.
they want to dismantle, right?
But-
Dismantle the whole police department.
Yes, Mr. President. Of course, the people who voted for that maintain their own private security. That's okay. But the shopkeeper, the guy running the gas station, the person trying to take the trash out in the middle of the night from the McDonald's can't call the police.
So when you guys hear the term abolish, they use the word abolish the police, abolish the departments. Some of these people are actually serious about that.
They are, Mr.
That's not
President.
just rhetoric.
No, they're insane, but they're serious, Mr. President. And it's the cities and it's the men and women who are going to suffer. I mean, it's elementary.
And
but they don't seem to
defunding
get
they're
it.
already doing. I mean, defunding they've started.
Yes, Mr.
New York took off $1 billion, right? So,
Yes, Mr. President.
So defund and abolish. And that's their favorite of all phrases, defund and abolish.
Yes, Mr. President. And then once they do that, who knows what their next step's going to be?
Who's gone the furthest of the cities
In
to
terms of-
defund and abolish?
I think Minneapolis, as far as I know, where they actually had, I understand it was a unanimous vote by their own council to completely
yes,
do away with it.
And yet the leaders have armed police around their house, right?
Yes.
That's
Mr.
nice.
President.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, thank you so much for taking this for us, President. My name is Mark Alvaro. I'm from New Jersey. I'm Pat Sawyer, Executive Vice President. We're in trouble. Our governor turned her back on us about a year ago. Our Attorney General's turned her back on us. The legislature pretty much is throwing crazy bills at us. We're in a fight for our lives and our members for our lives. Our guys and the girls are really in trouble in New Jersey right now, and we really need your help.
So surprised to hear about New Jersey. Because I know the troopers so well, I know the whole group so well.
The
I'm so
politicians turned their back on us overnight. And if we had a problem, I'd be the first one to say, we have a problem here and we have to straighten it out. We are 47th in shootings, and we're the densely populated state. So there's not a problem in New Jersey. And if there was, I'd be the first one at the table saying we have a problem. But they're coming down with some crazy legislation, and they're coming after us.
But those numbers will go up. Those numbers will change with time
absolutely.
if they do what you're saying.
No, I'm talking about police shootings. We are 47th lowest.
Yeah,
And
no,
with the
that's what I
density-
mean.
it's
That's what I mean.
And another thing is they closed the mental institutions in New Jersey. They put all the homeless and the mental people on the streets, and we're supposed to deal with them. We're not trained psychologists and psychiatrists.
When did they do that?
So they have it's been years already. So now it's getting worse and worse. And every time you go to an emotionally disturbed house, we're not supposed to. When mom is calling up, screaming and yelling, my son just stabbed me, and we walk into the house with a butcher knife full of blood, and you shoot the person. We're not supposed to know that he had problems and has emotional problems.
Yeah.
So we're supposed to deal with this in a matter of seconds, make that split decision. That's on TV. It's great, but in reality, Mr. President, it's scary situations, and our guys go to jail for shooting somebody for protecting their own lives and their families' lives.
That example is something that
And,
happens.
Mr. President, I never understood what fake news was until you said it all the time, and I can't believe how bad fake news is, as you say all the time.
Yeah, no, I've said it and I've learned. I thought it was fake before I got here, but not as bad as it is.
Yes, sir,
It's
Mr.
really it's a tragedy what they're able to report or not report. What they don't report is in many ways even worse.
Yes, sir.
Mike, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very brief. I first just want to say thank you to the nearly 250,000 men and women who put on the uniform of law enforcement that are part of this association. You have a president and a vice president and administration who understand men and women who serve in law enforcement have no ordinary jobs. You put on a uniform, you kiss your family goodbye in the morning, and you count our lives more important than your own. So please let them know that all of the passion that they hear from the president and this administration, the support that you have among the American people, which I believe with the president, the overwhelming majority of the American people, comes from a deep gratitude. Secondly, thank you for the endorsement of the National Association of Police Organizations for this president. I joined him on this journey 4 years ago. I saw the connection that he had with law enforcement from the very first day, and I know that police officers across the country have supported this president each and every day because they know that he understands the job that you do and supports your work. But I can tell you firsthand, serving alongside him every day, that when we see Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, driven by radical Democrats to call for defunding the police, abolishing the police, dismantling local officials, voting to dismantle local law enforcement agencies. We have leading politicians that have referred to police officers as stormtroopers and use the most pejorative terms. I want to say to you that it has only steeled this president and this administration's resolve to back the blue. And we are not going to defund the police. We're going to support law enforcement every day. As the president has said, through Operation Legend, through the COPS program, 4,000 police officers, through the president's executive action to give law enforcement agencies more tools to do better policing, even while we improve the quality of life for people all across our city. So I just want to be clear with you. Right next to him each and every day, I can tell you that everything you had heard from him 4 years ago when he was first running for president, his devotion to men and women in law enforcement has only been steeled by the rise of the radical left and the attacks on law enforcement, and we're going to be with you every step of the way. This president, this administration will always back the blue.
And we're working on additional support because you need that. We're the opposite of defund. And you're talking about peanuts by comparison to what they do and the damage they do and the lives that they destroy. You're talking about a very small amount of money. So we're with you all the way, 1,000%. And I want to thank you all for being here. I really appreciate your support. We'll never let you down. I'm for you. I mean, just by nature, it's natural. It's common sense. And you know what? If I thought you were doing a bad job, I'd let you know. You know that, Mick.
Yes, sir.
You know that, Pat. I'd let you know.
Yes.
But you're not allowed to do your job. That's the problem. You're not allowed, and you're dying to do your job. You could have stopped that New York stuff the first night. In 10 minutes, you could have stopped it. And you would have saved a lot of lives and a lot of anger and a lot of hardship. And a lot of COVID, by the way. You would have stopped because I saw them marching on top of each other. You would have saved a lot, and you wanted to do it, and they wouldn't let you do it. I saw that. They wouldn't let you do it. They were going actually the opposite way. Turn your back, and then people start getting hurt. That had nothing to do with it. They were getting hurt. They just don't let you do your job. All right. Well, I want to thank Jennifer. Go ahead.
Mr. President,
Go ahead.
on the negotiations with Congress, I think the Democrats are hoping to hear directly from you on what you support. Would you be willing to spell out what you
The
back?
Democrats don't care about the people of our country. I really don't. I told my people, the Democrats do not care about the people of our country. They don't want to do what you should be doing for the people of our country, whether it's unemployment or anything else. And all they care about is the election. And they're going to lose the election. You see what's going on with the polls right now. I guess we just got one over 50%. Rasmussen just came out. You see what's going on. Because the people get it. The Democrats are playing for November 3rd. And we're playing for the good of the people. It is a disgrace that they're not negotiating. But they're only looking to play a political game. I happen to think it's a bad political game. I think it hurts them.
I know that they look at you and what you say publicly different from what they hear from Mnuchin and Meadows. Are you willing to spell out exactly what you want right now, going
What I
forward?
want. And what I want is I want our people to be able to live and live well, because it wasn't their fault that China brought in this pandemic, that China brought in this plague. It's China's fault. You want to know the truth? China should be paying for it. And maybe they will. Maybe they will. You'll watch. You'll watch. What else?
Mr. President.
Mr. President, if we can ask you specifically, we heard yesterday your frustrations about how long it'll take to count the ballots here. Then why aren't you spending more energy to get the resources and the funding for the states that they want to be able to secure this election for all Americans?
Peter, you know nothing about my energy, okay?
What are you doing
about
specifically?
you know nothing about what I'm doing.
What are you doing?
Listen, you know nothing about what I do.
The Americans are listening.
So
What are you doing?
NBC, I just told you about the false report that NBC put out the other night about the mayor of Portland, and this is the kind of stuff you get. You'll see what happens. It is common sense. Everyone knows mail-in ballots are a disaster. You just have to take a look at the last recent. Take a look at New York City. Look at New York. They're still counting your ballots, Pat. Do you know that? They had a race, a small race by comparison. By comparison, tiny. It's so messed up. They have no idea there are ballots missing. Thousands and thousands of ballots are missing. They think they're going to send hundreds of millions of ballots all over the United States, and it's going to come out. You won't know the election result for weeks, months, maybe years after. Maybe you'll never know the election result, and that's what I'm concerned with. It'll be fixed. It'll be rigged. People ought to get smart. And I just hope our Republican voters, the people that are for you, are going to do what they have to do. Absentee ballots are great because absentee ballots, you have to go through a process to get them, and it's actually a great thing. Absentee ballots, I'm going to be voting absentee. An absentee ballot is one thing. A universal mail-in ballot is a disaster. These governors are going to send out millions of ballots. They don't even know where they're sending them. I already have friends, they got ballots for a son who died 7 years ago. They got, you don't even want to talk about it. But the media knows this. Actually, the Washington Post wrote a great article, of all groups. A week ago, the Washington Post wrote a great article that this is a disaster. This is going to be the greatest election disaster in history. And by the way, you guys like to talk about Russia and China and other places. They'll be able to forge ballots. They'll forge them. They'll do whatever they have to do. People should go and they should vote or do an absentee ballot.
So what are you doing to
The military predominantly votes. The military predominantly votes by mail or absentee.
Absentee.
And so
You didn't understand me. I said absentee ballots are actually a very good thing. Absentee ballots are secure and they're very good. But universal mail-in are a disaster. You're going to see an election and we're going to do very well in the election. Nobody wants that date more than me. I wish we'd move it up, okay? Move it up. But you're not prepared for what they're doing. And they're using COVID. You know, they're using the China virus. China must be very happy about it because they hit us with a virus and now they screw up an election like you will never see. You watch what happens. I don't think you'll ever give me any statement. I guess Trump was right, but the people know I'm right. Watch what happens. New York City has a little election. We just talked. You got to see. Do you know how far they're never going to have the result of that election? Never the correct result. They'll probably announce something at some point. But when did that take place? Like 5-6 weeks ago. Absentee ballots, great. Going to the polls, great. If you do universal mail-ins with millions and millions of ballots, you're never going to know what the real result of an election is. It's going to be a very, very sad day for our country. Go ahead.
On this topic, sir?
If the system is a disaster, as you say, why not commit to putting in resources to fix it?
We're putting in all the resources you can. But as a couple of the radical left people said, you know, who actually agree with me, they said, no matter what you do, we're not prepared for this. They're not prepared for an onslaught of millions of ballots pouring in. They're not prepared. They're not prepared. You watch. They're not going to announce anything on November 3rd. They're not going to announce it on the 4th or the 5th or the 6th. It'll go on forever. People should go. You know, they voted, Mick, during World War I. They voted during World War II. They went to the polls. They voted. They went to their booth, and they voted proudly. But now with COVID, they don't want to vote. It's not they don't want to vote. This will be catastrophic for our nation. And you'll see it. I'm always right about things like this. I guess I must be. I wouldn't be sitting here. Yes, Jennifer, go ahead. You want something? Jennifer, did you want?
No, that's all right.
Mr. President, what is your decision to delay the election in Hong Kong? What is your opinion?
I want to right now focus on this election. I'll have a statement about that soon. I heard that they did the delay in Hong Kong, and we'll have a statement about that. But I want to focus on this.
Sir, on this topic, you said.
A quick question on Obama. A quick question.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here to discuss the relentless work that we're doing to defeat the China virus and protect the people of Florida, great state. Just got the endorsement of the sheriffs, and they are amazing people. Law enforcement in Florida is very, very, very first rate. We appreciate that endorsement in particular. First, I want to provide an update to our response and on our response to hurricane. So the hurricane is, I'm not sure it's a hurricane yet. It's right now it's sort of projected as a storm/hurricane, right? What's going to happen? Is that looking like a hurricane to you?
I think that it did reach Category 1 status, but it's kind of right at the border.
Let's not let it get any bigger. But it's pretty severe nevertheless. A lot of water coming in. It's approaching the Florida coast. The storm's already passed through Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and I've approved emergency declarations for both of those areas. FEMA is closely coordinating with Florida, with your governor, happens to be on my right. Good job, by the way, Ron. You're doing a great job. And we're in constant contact with Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama, and anybody else that may have a problem, but we think it's going to work out very well. We have FEMA all set to go. In some of those states, they're already there. I ask all of those in the path of the storm to follow the guidance of your state, local, and tribal officials. My administration will be here for you every single step of the way. We've done everything we can do, and now we're just waiting for the storm. And I guess it's right behind me. It's following me. We're grateful to be joined by Health and Human Services Secretaries doing a fantastic job on COVID, or whatever you want to call it. There are many different names. All we know is it came from China, and they shouldn't have let it happen. But Alex Azar is here. Thank you, Alex, very much. Governor Ron DeSantis doing a fantastic job. Thank you. Previous governor and now Senator Rick Scott. He's representing Florida very well in Washington. And I just spoke with Marco Rubio, and likewise, he's doing a great job. And he sends his regards. State Senator Wilton Simpson. Thank you very much, Senator. Great job you're doing. State Representative Daniel Perez. Daniel, thank you, Daniel, very much. Pinellas County Commissioner Kathleen Peters. Hi,
Good to see
Kathy.
you.
Thanks very much. And CEO, Safety Net Hospital Alliance of Florida, Justin Senior. Thank you. Thank you, Justin, very much for being here. So we continue to take very aggressive action to combat the virus in Florida. And your state officials are amazing. They've been working so hard. The rate of positive cases in Florida has now declined. It's declining. And hospitalizations are declining in most places and pretty steadily. And we think there's going to be a big decline starting very soon. There is currently over 21% inpatient hospital bed capacity available. So there's plenty of bed capacity. And over 16% ICU capacity available, and some of that's going to be emptying out as people get better. They do get better, and they get better pretty fast. Statewide, we're providing additional resources and personnel to help save lives. We remain concerned about Florida, about Miami, and in a certain area of Miami in particular, but local officials are working very hard, and we think we have that one on the right step also. The test positivity rate has declined over the last week, and in some cases very substantially, as have hospitalization levels, but we must further reduce the spread, and that's what we're doing. We're working closely with health officials on the ground to support this effort. The single best way to defeat the disease is personal responsibility. You've heard me say it. You've heard a lot of people say it, actually. I urge all Americans to protect the elderly. The fact is you have to do the social distancing thing. It's a very important. Socially distance, wear a mask when you cannot avoid crowded places or socially distance, and wash your hands as often as possible. Almost half of all deaths nationwide have been in nursing homes and assisted living centers, and I have to say the state of Florida, with regard to the nursing homes, has done an incredible job, really an incredible job. They watched what was happening in some places, even beyond our own country, the other countries. They were seeing what was happening with the elderly, and particularly in nursing homes. And Ron, you've done a great job on that. We appreciate it. I have to say that there's been a big surge of the China virus in other countries, very big countries that we thought they were doing a good job, and they were doing a great job in some cases. But big headline in the Wall Street Journal just yesterday, and an editorial that all of a sudden they started to surge. So countries that we thought were doing great turned out to have difficulty, big difficulty. I won't name the countries, but you know them. There are a lot of them, actually. The average age of those who succumb to the virus is 78 years old. We're also closely monitoring the situation in Latin America and its impact in the United States. Latin America has more confirmed cases than anywhere else in the world, actually substantially more. They're having a hard time. We've sent many ventilators to Latin America. We've sent many ventilators to different countries in Europe, Africa, and all over the world. We're making thousands of ventilators now a month. We started off with essentially very little, and we've become a ventilator manufacturer, so to speak, and we're helping a lot of countries. We've sent them to France. We've sent them to Italy, a lot to Italy. We sent them to Mexico. We sent them to Russia. Moscow's having a tremendous problem. And we've sent them to a lot of different countries, many. and we have a full supply in our country. The amazing thing is we started with very few, and not one person that needed a ventilator did not get a ventilator. So that's a pretty amazing statistic. We have nearly 1,400 federal personnel on the ground already in Florida, including personnel supporting nursing homes. We have doctors, military doctors. They're incredible and very talented people, and frankly, they're very brave people, but they're all over the state helping with your medical folks. And Ron asked if he could get some extra people here. We did it immediately. In the last week, we've opened 5 new surge testing sites in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood Beach, Pompano Beach, and 2 in Miami. We're sending rapid test kits to 701 Medicare and Medicaid certified nursing homes in the state. We've also sent multiple shipments of protective equipment to all of the nursing homes. And as I said, on ventilators, I can also talk about in Florida and Miami, they have everything they need. They don't need any. We've sent a lot. They don't need any. Testing-wise, we've tested almost 60 million people throughout the country, which is about 6 times more than any other country, close to 6 times more than any other country. We have, if you look at India, they're at 11 million. We're going to be at over 60 million. So they've done a tremendous job in testing, considering we started off with very little. It was a unknown disease, and it was an unknown test. FEMA, HHS, and the private sector have delivered more than 10 million N95 masks, 43 million surgical masks, 19.7 million gowns, and 1.3 billion medical gloves to Florida. 1.3 billion gloves, Ron. We've secured 90% of the world's supply of remdesivir, which has been very, very successful, and have sent over 143 vials to Florida hospitals as a really something that's very special, and we're working on very hard. Operation Warp Speed. Today we reached a $2 billion agreement with Sanofi and GSX to conduct clinical trials and mass produce 100 million doses of vaccine. What we've done is rather incredible, I have to say. We have many companies, great companies, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, Pfizer. Many companies are very close to getting the vaccine. We think it's going to be in a very short time from now. And we're set with our military to deliver the vaccine. We have a tremendous military delivery service, and that will be doing it. It's called logistics, and they will be taking the vaccine and bringing it all over the country. And I'm sure that we'll be supplying it beyond our country also, but we're going to have it very soon. We're also having tremendous work done on other treatments other than vaccines. So we have a lot of great things in the pipeline. I think things that are going to be really spectacular. I'm very excited about therapeutics, because therapeutically I think we have answers that are really looking good. In fact, if I had my choice, I'd probably initially maybe you go with the therapeutics, because you walk into the hospital, they get a shot, or they do a transfusion, depending on the company and what they're doing. And a short time later, just people get better. So we're looking at that very, very strongly. I just want to thank Rick and Ron and everybody. They've done really a fantastic job. We've worked together so long and so hard. And this is something that came upon us. It should have never happened, but it came upon us. And there's been great bravery from our doctors and our nurses, our frontline people. And we're very proud of what's happening, and we'll get rid of it. We'll beat it, and it'll be soon. We want to get our schools open. We want to get our businesses open. Much of the country is open. We've set records on number of employees and hiring and employment. Basically, if you look at the number, I think last month was the highest number ever hired in 1 month, and the month before that, we broke that record. So from that standpoint, we've done well. Retail sales set a record last month. So we're doing really record increase. So we're doing really well. And I think this will end hopefully very soon, but we're fighting hard and we're fighting smart. And I'd like to ask your governor to say a few words. Please, Ron.
Thank you, Mr. President. Welcome back to Florida. Thanks for all your support. We are monitoring very closely the track of Hurricane Isaias. Both the 11 a.m. and the 5 p.m. advisories from National Hurricane Center tacked it a little bit closer to the Florida coast. I think it's pretty clear we will get, at a minimum, tropical storm force wind impacts, likely hurricane force wind impacts. We don't know for sure whether the eye will actually interact with the coast of Florida. We're looking actually probably northern part of Palm Beach County, maybe a little bit north of that is kind of where they're going. Obviously, we'll know more. So I would just urge Floridians, just particularly if you're from Deerfield Beach up until the Brevard Volusia area, you are under a hurricane watch. Make sure you have your plan. Make sure you have 7 days of food and supplies and medicine. There could be some power outages, and it's an ongoing, very fluid situation. As it does move west, it's kind of weakening a tad, and if it strengthens, we think it may end up going further east, but just continue to listen to your local officials. We'll be providing updates multiple times a day throughout the weekend, and obviously the federal government's been great helping. We did submit for a landfall emergency declaration, so we look forward to that support. And we also want to thank the administration for supporting us with the fight against COVID-19. Anytime we needed anything, we would talk to the president, vice president, and we would get it. So when we started to see the hospital admissions really pick up, the doctors were prescribing more remdesivir. So we told them, hey, you guys have been sending us enough for when we had very low census. Now that the census is higher, can we get more? Can we move up these shipments? And Alex was involved, the president. We got it up, and so we've accelerated a number of weeks of shipments, so they've been able to have the medications that they need. Also thank, CDC put out, I think, important guidance last Friday that didn't really get much attention about people going back to work. A lot of employers in Florida had been demanding a negative PCR test in order to go back to work. CDC recommends against that now, and I think that is exactly the right thing compared to what we've seen. These PCR tests, you can test positive for 12 weeks. So we have people that are not infectious, have no live virus, and they're getting a positive test 10 days, 20 days out. And so CDC recommends going to a symptom-based approach. We've put that out, the state of Florida, to all the employers. The symptom-based approach really is the more effective approach, and I think that will just help people be able to go. If you're symptomatic and you test positive, obviously, we're inferring live virus there, but the asymptomatic, a 12-week window, and we really don't know whether you're infectious or not. So I think what we're going to be doing, because of what you guys have just sent us additionally, the wait times on the labs, it's just gotten backed up. We're doing so many tests. Sometimes it takes 7 to 10 days to get the results back. So what we're going to do is we've already focused on our symptomatic test takers, which are a minority of the people testing. We have agreements with labs to get it turned around quicker. And then the federal government has sent us these point-of-care antigen tests. So we're going to have 1,250 of those a day. So we're going to convert some of our bigger test sites into point-of-care antigen testing for symptomatic and elderly people, probably in Miami-Dade. So this way, they get the result in 15 minutes, which is good for them, and then it gets reported to the state, so we have a real-time understanding of the positivity, everything's going on. When we get the test results reported, some of these tests are from 2 or 3 weeks ago, and these data dumps. So I think it'll help us be able to understand the prevalence better. So that's an important tool. So I just wanted to say thank you for sending those machines to us.
And you have the numbers in 5 minutes to 15 minutes or something like that.
That's correct.
Especially for the elderly. Rick Scott, please.
Sure. Well, first off, when I was governor, you were very helpful in the hurricanes we had, and I just want to tell you, I talked to the governor of Puerto Rico this morning, and she was very appreciative.
Good.
You have FEMA's there. FEMA's being helpful. They've got some flooding, so she was traveling the island. But I said, is there anything you need out of the federal government? And they said, you guys have done a great job.
That's great, Rick. Thank you very much.
Thanks for doing that. And I just want to thank you for your commitment to the vaccine. I know that'll be a game changer when that happens, and I know you and your administration have been very aggressive at making sure that happens in the testing. So I just want to tell you, I think you've done a great job trying to make sure everybody is getting this done as quickly as possible.
Right.
I think the governor is saying some of the issues that I'm sure a lot of states are having, but I know the Trump administration is working hard. I want to thank Secretary Azar. His team has done a great job. I want to tell you, Steve Hahn has done a great job. I mean, if you look at what the president talked about with regard to therapeutics, that would not happen but for HHS and but for the FDA and the authority you gave to doctors to be able to make decisions and be doctors. And I know you're trying to get that information out as quickly as possible so people make good decisions. So I want to thank everybody.
Thank you, Rick. And the speed of approval is just a tiny fraction of the time that it would have been in let's say another administration. It's the FDA has been fantastic. They're getting things through, Ron, at levels that nobody ever thought possible. We're close to a vaccine. We think we're close to a vaccine, and that's been a matter of months as opposed to many years. It could take many years, and we think we're going to have a great answer very, very soon. Alex, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. So we're working very closely with FEMA as well as with the emergency authorities here in Florida on the hurricane situation. And of course, would advise all Floridians follow the advice of your state and local leaders as to what to do. But that advice may be a little bit different this time because of COVID. So normally you might evacuate. This time more advice is going to focus on sheltering in place for Floridians who live at home, as well as for those in long-term care centers like nursing homes or for people who are hospitalized. In addition, we're recommending and working with the state to establish shelters that would be non-congregate places for sheltering in place. If you do end up in a place that's a congregate setting, it's the same advice that we give in a non-emergency situation. Wear face coverings, practice good physical distance, good personal hygiene. As the President said, we've had I think it's a historic 24 hours on the development of therapeutics and vaccines under the President's Operation Warp Speed initiative. Yesterday afternoon, the President made a historic national call to action for people to donate plasma. So I call on Floridians, please, if you have tested positive and recovered from COVID, go to coronavirus.gov and learn how you can donate your plasma and save lives through the American Red Cross, through America's blood banks. You can make a real difference. And then, as the President said just this morning, we announced the sixth vaccine candidates from Sanofi GSK, 100 million doses with an option for 500 million more. So that's now 6 major historic investments to bring us vaccines coming into the fall. And then also today, out of our National Institutes of Health, the RADx initiative led by Dr. Collins, which is next generation testing and diagnostics, announced $250 million of funding on 7 novel diagnostics that we're investing in that we believe could bring millions of additional diagnostics to the table as soon as
Now you're going to see numbers that you wouldn't even believe, and it's going to be fair. It's not fair that other countries pay a fraction but I mean a fraction of what we do. We pay all research and development and promotional costs and everything. It's put onto the United States. They pay nothing. And then on top of it, they say, this is what we'll pay and this is what it is. And the United States will pay the remainder of the difference. I mean, this is the way they buy. They go and I won't mention names of countries, but they say, this is what we're going to pay. The United States will make up the difference. And that's not going to happen anymore. Okay, thank you all very much. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Are when they talk about how to protect their families.
We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will make America great again.
Welcome to Team Trump Online.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Team Trump Online. I'm Hogan Gidley, National Press Secretary for the Trump-Pence re-election campaign. We've got a great show tonight. Our very own Mark Lauder will be interviewing Vice President Mike Pence about the tragic skyrocketing rates of crime we've seen in many of our communities. Joe Biden and local leaders in these Democrat-controlled cities have inexplicably embraced the dangerous defund the police movement. The vice president will weigh in. And we'll be getting reaction from officers about how Democrats have just abandoned them, siding with lawlessness over law enforcement. And later, we'll be joined by Brandon Tatum, former police officer and founder of TatumReport.com, to discuss the vice president's remarks and why this election is so crucial for restoring and upholding law, order, safety, and security in our cities and communities across this nation. But first, let's hand it over to Mark Lauder.
Thanks, Hogan. I'm in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, where this week Vice President Mike Pence addressed hundreds of people at a Cops for Trump rally. The Vice President talked about the president's commitment to law and order. And I also had a chance to talk to him one-on-one about his longtime personal connection to police.
You know, growing up, I had a lot of heroes, and my uncle, who was a Chicago police officer, was one of them. I remember making a long drive up from the small town where we lived in Indiana to Chicago and being at my grandparents' house, seeing him come walking out in his uniform with his sidearm. And literally from that day forward, like most Americans, police officers have been my heroes. I mean, men and women that put on the uniform of law enforcement every day to protect and serve our communities are really the best of us. And they can be confident that this president and this administration are going to back the blue. We're going to stand with law enforcement, especially at a time when we see rising violence in our cities, when we see Joe Biden and the Democratic Party currying favor of the radical left, embracing their plans to defund the police. As I said here in Pennsylvania today, we're not going to defund the police. We're going to stand with law enforcement and give them the resources as they protect our communities and uphold the rule of law.
As we see what's gripping the violence that's gripping the cities and the threats to federal officers, federal buildings, what does it say for President Trump to stand there with law enforcement to protect the rule of law?
Well, look, we all know that what happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis was a tragedy, and justice will be served. There's no excuse for it. But there's also no excuse for the violence and the rioting that has followed ever since. I mean, we're 67 days of violent rioting and protests in Portland alone. And in one city after another where we see the radical left and the Democratic Party embracing policies to cut funding to the police, to defund the police, or even in Minneapolis itself where they're advocating dismantling the police department in that great city. I think it just means the world to people in law enforcement and people all across this country that we have a president who will stand without apology for the men and women who serve in law enforcement. And President Trump's not just standing, but we're providing resources. I mean, this president has provided resources to hire 4,000 more police officers around the country. We're deploying federal law enforcement officials through Operation Legend to cities around the country. We're going to continue to make sure that we stand for law and order and give our law enforcement community the support that they need at every level to achieve real safety for our cities, large and small.
And lastly, as a father, what does it mean to you to protect America's families? It's something that falls on you.
We live in the greatest nation on earth, and every American has every right to believe that their streets are safe, that they can close the door of their home and go to bed at night and be secure. And I promise you, with President Donald Trump in the White House for 4 more years, we're going to deliver that peace and security to America's cities and America's towns. We're going to make sure the American people have the support in law enforcement that they so richly deserve. And we're going to do that by supporting these incredible men and women in law enforcement. I mean, to be here today in Pennsylvania, to see so many people, especially in law enforcement, come out as a part of a Cops for Trump rally it's very humbling for me to see the supports we have. But cops are for Trump because they know Trump's for cops.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Good. Thank you, Mark.
When you hear and you see what's going on right now in our country, and you hear about the defund police movement, what does that say?